Welcome to So and So, brought to you by BERNINA, Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Amanda Carita, the founder and owner of So English Fabrics in Oceanside, California. Born in England, Amanda started her sewing adventures at the age of 5. Her first machine was her grandmother's hand crank. For many years, Amanda worked in casinos and cruise ships, returning to sewing as a single mom of 2 boys to make scarves to pay for Christmas. As she pursued her craft, she ran into difficulty sourcing materials, discovering that beautiful fabrics were expensive and affordable fabrics of low quality. Thus began her dream to provide beautiful and affordable fabrics to the sewing community. Her specific sewing community is made up of a diverse group of people of all ages, sizes, of different backgrounds and beliefs, who come together over a shared passion, creating beautiful, one-of-a-kind apparel. She's created a community of positivity where her customers feel safe to share and to encourage one another to greater success. Amanda, welcome to So and So.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you so much for having me today.
You know, we've got some fun things to talk about today, and I want to jump right in about the fact that you were quite young when you started sewing and you used your grandmother's hand crank machine. Tell us why you started to sew and how those early years sewing were for you.
Well, my mom became a single mom when I was just a few months old, and we lived with my grandparents. And my mom obviously had to work full time, and my grandmother was charged with taking care of me. And she sewed all of her own clothes. And my family actually have a background in textiles. My great grandmother was a weaver. She used to weave the tape that goes down the pants of the soldiers,
Oh,
the ones
sure.
you'll see outside Buckingham Palace and everything.
Yes.
My great uncle was a weaver for Cash's of Coventry. They do silk weaved pictures, but they're actually better known for weaving the tags that you sew in all of your kids' school uniforms. So my aunt had a haberdashery store in Leicester, which was pretty close to where my family was. And so as my grandmother was taking care of me, she taught me to do things that she enjoyed doing. I can remember my first kind of foray into sewing was those old cardboard boards, and you had almost like a shoelace,
Oh,
and
sure.
you sewed around the edge of a picture using a shoelace.
Yes.
And then we moved on to dolls' clothes and things like that. And she had a hand crank machine, and that's what I learned on, and I actually still have it.
Do you still sew with it?
No, I'm very much about modern technology when it comes to sewing. I love being able to press a button and it cuts my threads. I like being able to press another button and backstitch, to secure the threads. I'm very lucky. I have a BERNINA L850, which is just an amazing
Mm-hmm.
machine,
Mm-hmm.
and just makes it a pleasure to sew. I suppose if I was desperate to sew something and we had a power outage, I might pull it out. But apart from that, I just like to preserve it as it is.
Do you remember the first piece of clothing that you sewed?
Oh my goodness. I remember sewing woven clothing. I can remember making a bomber jacket when I was probably about 13 years old with the help of my mom. I'd sew skirts and but it was very much when I'm doing shows now, I love to say, when people are like, oh, knit fabric, and I'm like, it's not your grandma's knits. And I used to buy every Mother's Day, every birthday, every Christmas, I would go and buy 2 yards of fabric for my grandmother to make herself a dress. And she would make the same basic style of dress every single time. That's what she wore every single day. And the fabric of choice was crimpline. So technically it was a knit, but it didn't have the stretch that I use and that I look for in my textiles.
Mm-hmm.
So you still had to put a zipper in the back of the dress. So I remember, cutting out with my grandmother on the dining table, helping my grandmother, and just sewing with her. And then my great grandmother, her mother moved in, and she lived there. So we actually had four generations of females living in the same house, and all four generations would sew.
That's a great memory.
Yeah, it's something that really brought us together. It was something that, a common interest, a common bond.
Indeed. Amanda, you talked about the fabrics that you use, and you started So English because you identified a need. You wanted to provide affordable, quality fabrics. So tell us more about this. How do you source your fabrics? How do you provide them to people? It sounds like quite the challenge.
I was lucky enough. I went up to LA with some friends of mine, and they were looking to do those knotted blankets. And they're like, "Oh, come with us, come with us. You like making things." So I went up there with them, and I was like, these would be kind of cool. I'll buy some fleece fabric and I'll make some blankets for my boys. And I got the fabric and I came home and I kept looking at it. I didn't touch it. I just kept looking at it. And I thought, I can't think of anything more monotonous than sitting there for hours going snip, snip, snip. I
Hmm.
was just like, what am I thinking? So I thought, you know what? I hadn't sewn for quite some time. And I was like, you know what? I still have a sewing machine. Why am I going to sit there, snip, 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 when I could just get my machine out and I could be done with this in under an hour? So I made blankets for both of my boys. And a friend of mine came over and she's like, oh, I didn't know you sewed. She's like, I really want a maxi skirt. And it was at a time of the year or one of those years where maxi skirts weren't in fashion. And she said, I'd love a maxi skirt. And I was like, oh, I can make a maxi skirt. I'd never made one before, but I was like, I can sew. It's pretty simple. It's a front, to back, and a waistband. And so I went back up to LA and they have a big textile area of downtown. And I went up there and I found some fabric and I made her a skirt. And then somebody else asked me to make them a skirt. So I went back up to LA and I started looking for different fabrics that were suitable for making maxi skirts.
Hmm.
But when I was going around the stores, I'd only find, a couple of yards of this or a couple of yards of that, or I'd find a fabric and I loved the print, but I didn't like the base fabric it was on. Either it felt thin and cheap, or it didn't have the stretch that I wanted. It didn't have the recovery that I needed, that type of thing.
Hmm.
And I really just set to, you know, finding the textiles that I needed. And if I didn't find what I was looking for, then I found a way to make it happen. So we now source fabrics in multiple countries, through multiple companies. Um, if I'm looking for a print, if I have an idea, especially around the holidays, I couldn't find any pre-printed holiday fabrics. So I started working with printers. I have things printed domestically. I also have things printed overseas. So most of the fabric either is American, Chinese, or Korean.
Do you design the prints on the fabric?
I come up with the ideas
Hmm.
and then I work with people who know what they're doing. I think that's I think recognizing our strong points and then finding other people's who've got the strong points that we need. I'm not a graphic designer, and so I use people who can create some of these gorgeous prints for me. And I'll just come up with some ideas. I'll be like, I'm looking at a llama floating around outside. So we do actually have a llama print. And, so I'll come up with an idea and I'll be like, okay, I want to do a llama print and I want it to be this scale. I want it to be these colors. I want to add cactuses in the background. Um, I want to toss the pattern. If you toss a pattern rather than having a directional pattern,
Hmm.
then or design, I say I cross over between English and American. So sometimes I have to explain. I'm actually meaning something else. Um, but you'll get more yield. So you can make a garment out of less yardage if you're using a toss pattern rather than a directional pattern. So a lot of our designs are done that way just to, to lessen the expense.
Does the community that you've created of sewists ever get involved in giving you ideas or suggesting patterns?
Yes, they do. We'll often find people saying, I'm really looking for this, or, I can't find that. And we'll take that idea. To avoid any copyright issues, we don't take designs from anybody else. We want to make sure that we're not going to have any copyright issues or anything. So
Hmm.
we'll take general ideas, but we don't take the actual graphics.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to your years working in the casinos and on cruise ships, which I'm sure was fascinating in itself. How did this experience help you with founding and running So English?
I think learning to work with lack of sleep and lack of days off. Um, cruise ships are notorious. I think I did the longest stretch I did was about 11 months without a day off.
Oh my
And
goodness.
we would average, I think my average was about 77 hours a week.
Hmm.
And you really just got stuck in and did everything. And I think that was kind of, you know, um, something that I've kept going. I'm not somebody who sits around and watches TV. It's very limited, and it's hard to watch TV on cruise ships. Obviously, they don't have cable.
Hmm.
Um, which is kind of funny because we were asked that one time, just to digress. Somebody asked, does the cruise ship have cable TV? And we told them that actually we have somebody who sits out on the back deck with a really large spool of cable, and as we sail away from port, they unwind the cable,
Oh, you didn't.
and then on the way back, they have to wind it all back up again. And they were like, really? And we're like, we're all totally straight faced, and we're like, yeah, yeah, that's how it works. That's how we have our power source too.
Did they go looking for the cable winder?
I don't believe they did, but just on another funny story, they put nets over the swimming pool at night so that there's nobody accidentally trips and falls in. And one of the passengers asked a coworker of mine, why do they put these nets? And he said, well, madam, the reason for the nets is because the bread is delivered to the cruise ship every morning at 5 a.m. by helicopter. And they bake the bread in Florida, and they fly it over by helicopter, and they drop it onto those nets. That's the only place on the ship that they can drop these bags of bread. And at the end of the cruise, he had this horrible comment because apparently she'd got up at 5 o'clock every single morning of the cruise so that she could go onto the top deck and watch the bread delivery.
Oh my, and missed it every day.
Yeah,
Mhm.
whilst they were busy baking it down in the kitchens.
Indeed.
Yes.
Well,
So
you certainly knew how to have fun on your long days on the cruise ships.
work hard, play hard.
Indeed. Today, you're not looking for the bread to be dropped on the pool, but you do so almost every day.
Yes, I do. I was sewing this morning.
What do you like to sew and why?
I actually, people laugh at me because I regularly get up and sew what I'm going to wear that day. I'll get up in the morning, and before I have a shower, I'll come down, I'll make a cup of tea, and I'll make myself a top while I'm making my tea because I don't like to just sit and drink tea. I don't like to have idle hands. I like to be busy. So I'll get up in the morning and I'll just jump in and make something and go have a shower and wear whatever I made in the morning. So right now, my favorite thing to make is the Phoenix Tank, which is a So English Fabrics pattern. And I'll make one of those quickly in the morning while I drink my tea because it's still in the 80s over here. And when it starts cooling down, I'll switch over to hoodies, which are my other favorite thing to make.
Mhm.
I live in hoodies. I'm like you said, I'm in Oceanside, so Southern California, we don't really have to worry about, heavy winter clothes or rain and that type of thing. So hoodies are my go-to um, for wearing in the warehouse or riding my bicycle, that type of thing. So I have a whole closet full, and there's never too many.
So let me ask you this. You are a very successful business person, entrepreneur. You get up in the morning. It's amazing to me that you just sew what you want to wear for the day and you've started your day. Now that you are running So English, what's a typical day after that like for you?
Oh my goodness. Today I got some things ready to have cut so that we can restock our ready cuts. We have a listing tonight, so I'm going to be running back to the warehouse and making sure that we have everything that we needed, and I can get that over to Heidi so she can carry on with her side of the listing,
Hmm.
making bundles to put onto the website, answering customers' questions. I try to stay very active in our Facebook group, so if anybody's having any questions, it's not just my team that are answering them. I like to answer those personally as well when I have the time. Um, Taking care of my kids, I'll normally rush home and take care of my dogs, and then rush back to the warehouse, and just busy. I have plans to do some sewing this evening. We have a new pattern coming out later in the month, so I'm testing that one at the moment, trying to iron out um, any changes that need to be made for it. So I've got to make a few of those cardigans. Um, just that'll probably keep me busy until it's bedtime.
Sounds like there is no typical day because tomorrow could be totally different.
Tomorrow I'm supposed to be doing a run through with Sulky. We have a promotion that we're doing with Sulky threads and organ needles. Getting ready to do some shows now that things are opening up. Um,
Hmm.
Trying to figure out Christmas designs. There's never a dull moment, but I love the fact that every day is different. There's obviously some things that, we repeat on a daily basis, but I love flying by the seat of my pants. I like it, like our conversation before we recorded this. Let's just jump in and do it. Let's just have a conversation.
Hmm.
Earlier this week, I was talking to Pam Mashi. We went live together on Facebook, and we had a few technical difficulties, but Pam's the ultimate professional, and we ironed out those kinks and jumped in. And we have a BERNINA promotion going on at the moment, and
Hmm.
just just love seeing where the day takes me.
Now you just shared with us about your day. What's really important to you is the community of sewists that you've created, and you talk about the safety to share within this community. Tell us more about that.
Very much so. We just want it to be a safe place, somewhere where people can get away from life sometimes, just they can connect through sewing. It's very supportive. If somebody posts something and they say, "Oh, I'm not too sure about this," so many people come back and say, "No, you did a great job. You did a fantastic, that was the first thing you ever made. Wow, I wish my first attempt had been that good." We had one lady who we were doing a sew along for our Seattle shirt, and she'd purchased a machine and she was waiting to have some lessons. And she jumped in and she followed the video tutorials. She made a wearable garment the very first time she sat down at a sewing machine. And I
Wow.
just think that's incredible.
Hmm.
People aren't going to shame you because of your size or because of anything. There's no reason to. I think it was Pam and I were talking one time, and it was just with everything that's been going on in the world, just to have a nice place, a nice community, somewhere where you feel welcome, where you can just sit and, ignore the news or any issues, and just be able to relax and focus on what brings you pleasure.
Have you seen this community grow notably during the pandemic?
I think most definitely. A lot of people who had never sewn before, pulled out machines or borrowed machines or learned to sew to make masks. And and I think it really brought the whole sewing community together. You know, when I first started So English, people would say to me, "Oh, so you're going to sell fabric to all the grandmas?" And I'm like, "Actually, no. I'm actually selling it to their children so they can create for their grandchildren."
Mhm.
And, so we have the moms, we have the grandmas, we have the people without parents, without children. The love of sewing is just something that's brought us all together. And, just really hoping that people who brought their machines out to make masks have kind of caught the sewing bug a little bit. And and now they're like, okay, now I don't have to spend all my time making masks. What else could I make? I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying creating something. One of the things for me when I was working in casinos was it's you go in, you deal cards, you make tips, you come home. And at the end of the day, that whether you had a good day or a bad day is defined by how much money you made.
Mhm.
That's basically it. People say, what do you do for a living? And I used to tell them, I said, oh, I take money off people.
Mhm.
And that kind of summed it up. But there was nothing tangible when I came home. There was no feeling of accomplishment. And I loved being able to come home and make something. I had something to show for my day. I could show I'd been productive. I could show, I don't just take money off people for a living. I create things. And it's just a whole different mindset. Heidi, who is basically the most amazing right hand you could have, um, her Instagram is sewing for sanity. And
Hmm.
I think that really sums things up.
Mhm. Sewing for sanity, let's take that another step further. There seems to be a strong mental health component to sewing as well as there was to baking and many other things during the pandemic, but sewing really stood out as something that people would do to help them get through this.
hmm I really think so. I really think so. And unlike baking, you don't have the calories.
Indeed.
So you don't have to worry about that COVID-19 if you're sewing instead of baking.
Sure.
Um, but I think even now the effects of it. You go into major stores and the shelves just aren't as full as they used to be. The
Mhm.
choices aren't there like they used to be. For myself, I create my own clothing because then I get the fit that I want. Um, I like my t-shirts to be a little longer. I wear a lot of leggings because if I'm in the warehouse, I don't have to worry about my clothing. I don't have to worry about snipping my pants and if it gets in the way of the fabric.
Mhm.
So I wear a lot of leggings, but I like having a slightly longer top just to make it a little bit more appropriate. I couldn't find tops like that in the store. So for me, I know what length I like my top. I know that I prefer to cut it so that it has a little extra give from the underbust because I'm not as young as I used to be. I've had two C-sections. There's a little disguising going on there, and so I think that just being able to pull out your machine and just it can be very tranquil. It can be just a time for reflection. Even sometimes I'll sit behind my sewing machine and I'll just let my mind wander. I don't watch TV or anything while I'm sewing. I like to just sit and sew. And it's it's I think mentally it's great. It keeps you on your toes sometimes. And as far as the sanity is concerned, definitely until the seam ripper comes out.
Indeed. I want to talk a little bit more about your company, So English. Tell us how you named the company. How did you choose the name?
Oh my goodness. Couple of glasses of wine and a lack of imagination.
And whatever it takes.
Right. I've never been I was always in school, math was my thing. I'm a pretty practical
Mhm.
person, and I used to love math. And then they'd hand me a page and say write an essay. And I'd sit there and sit there and sit there, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have no idea what to write.
Mm-hmm.
And so my creativity definitely comes out in my sewing more than my writing. And so I'll never get a job as a copywriter or somebody coming up with names and slogans or anything else like that. But so English, I was like, people always ask, why so English? And I'm like, well, I'm the English in so English. So, and then the so just kind of happened.
And at your company, I want to talk about kind of your philosophy. So you strive to empower the community by giving them the resources and instruction to make their visions come to life. And you have two core tenets. The first is self-made fashion can be more economical than purchasing ready to wear. And two, we need not sacrifice beauty or quality to make this possible.
Most definitely.
So to you, So English is more than a brand. It's a movement to make the dream of self made fashion a reality for everyone. This is amazing. Tell us more about all of this.
Well, thank you. When I was sewing, I found it very difficult to find the fabrics that I wanted. And one thing that I kept popping up, I'd be on Facebook and it kept popping up. It was, why make it yourself? Why buy it for $10 when you can make it yourself for $92 in craft
Hmm.
supplies? And I thought, it doesn't have to be that way. Why does it have to be that way? you know um and two things. Number one is, why do we always have to compare our skills with Walmart prices? Why can't we compare our skills with the t-shirt that you find in Bloomingdale's? Yes, you can go into Walmart, you can buy a white t-shirt for $4. You can also go in Bloomingdale's and buy a white t-shirt for
Hmm.
$80. Why do we always feel the need to compare our skills with the lower end? And so I feel like there's some compromise there. I'm not going to go and spend $80 on a t-shirt, but I'd be very happy to spend $10 on a nice quality fabric and make that shirt myself.
Hmm.
So I think that we can make those quality garments for a fraction of the price. Now, when I started So English, didn't want to focus on sales. I wanted to focus on education. And that's something that we've continued to do. Every pattern that we have released, we have a full video tutorial. We have um, we have amazing admins that are always there to answer any questions. So if you're not sure how you should do something, they're there to help. We want to hold your hand. We want to guide you through the steps of learning how to create garments. And I didn't want it to go the way of like just a hobby that you felt you were no good at, and you try it a couple of times and then you get frustrated. And so I really wanted to focus on the education and the hand holding and you know eh, the encouragement. Hey, yes, you can do this. Don't give up because that neckband looks like that. Let us help
Hmm.
you. Let us help you improve that neckband so that you're really happy with that garment that you just created and you're giving yourself a pat on the back. The other thing is, we're always the first to point out the flaws in the garments that we make. And my suggestion is, don't point them out, because if you don't point them out, chances are nobody else is even going to know they're there.
It's interesting. All of the sewists and quilters that we've talked to on this podcast have said the same thing, that there is beauty in imperfection. Most people aren't going to see it. It's what makes it unique.
I made myself a dress recently, and as I was finishing it, I realized I'd snipped a hole right in the very front of the chest. Oh my goodness, I looked at this thing and I'm like, "Oh, I can't believe I did that."
Hmm.
And I was rushing to go somewhere and I was like, "Oh my goodness." So you know what I did?
What?
I went rummaging in my cupboard and I was like, I know I have like an iron-on or a decorative patch of some. So it's now my California dress, because it was a black dress and I had this black patch that was about 2 inches by 6 inches, and I sewed it on the front of my dress, and nobody knows there's a hole underneath it.
And it's a unique one of a kind.
Yes. I think that, there's so many different things that we can, y- you know, hey, what if I tried this and what if I tried that? It's that nobody needs to know why.
True. Amanda, what's next for you? What's your dream?
Oh my goodness. The sky's the limit. I feel like the only limitations that we have are the ones that we place on ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, so just continue doing what I'm doing, and let's take it to the next level. I want to get everybody sewing. Everybody deserves, well, clothes that fit. And I think that once we always say, people will dip their toe into the rabbit hole of knit fabrics, and you kind of tumble down it. You realize, everybody, regardless of your size, everybody that I speak to is like, oh, well, you know, my legs are longer than normal, or one arm shorter than the other, or I have to take all my dresses up. I was talking to a lady recently. We did some pop-up shops up in quality sewing in the greater Seattle area, and I was talking to one lady, and she goes, oh no, she's like, your fabrics are beautiful. She's like, but I'm a quilter. And I said, oh, okay. I'm like, have you never thought about it? She's like, no, no, I don't do clothes. And then, we carried on talking about sewing in general. And then she said, I can never find pants that fit me.
Hmm.
And I said, so why aren't you making your own clothes? And I regularly get told by people, I'm a quilter.
Mhm.
I don't, I don't sew clothes. And I said, well, and it always baffles me because quilters have crazy amazing sewing skills,
Mhm.
and they have all the equipment that they need. And I always ask them, I'm not trying to get you to stop quilting or anything, but wouldn't you like to quilt wearing comfortable clothing that actually fit you?
Mhm.
And that was the same conversation I had with this lady. She said, I'm tall and I have this issue and that issue. And I said, well, here's a pant pattern and here's a tutorial. Why don't you just give it a try? You already have all the equipment you need.
The interesting thing is we have interviewed designers on this show who have created clothing out of quilts,
Hmm.
so you can mix the 2.
You most definitely can. You most definitely can. And so many clothing projects, I can make a pair of leggings in about 15 minutes. I can go from literally from a piece of fabric to a pair of leggings in about 15 minutes and be wearing them.
Mhm.
And we carry the same performance fabrics as like Lululemon, Under Armour, Nike, Adidas.
Mhm.
Lululemon leggings are about $100 a pair. You can make them for yourself for about $13.
There's the case closed argument right there. Right there.
Hmm. And nobody, and so many people, don't think twice about, oh, I really need these leggings, and I'm sitting over here going, oh my goodness, I could have like 8 pairs for the same price.
Mhm. Now we've talked about a lot of things today. What I wanna know from you is there a question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
Oh my goodness, I really don't think so. But I have to remember, do you know what I'm doing? And this is something when you said what's next,
Mhm.
I'm teaching on a sewing cruise.
Tell us more about that.
Um, it was scheduled to be before the pandemic, and I was actually asked to teach on one that was leaving from New Jersey, and it was doing New Jersey, New England, and then going over to Bermuda. Well, I worked on cruise ships for many, many years, never been to Bermuda. Always wanted to go to Bermuda, but never made it there. And I was so excited. And I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. This is going to be so much fun. And I sat down and I looked at the dates and I went, oh, epic mom fail. My eldest son is graduating from high school while I would be on this cruise.
Mhm.
So I thought, I joked with him. There was no way I was going to go, but I did joke with him, well, how important would it be for me to be there? And he's looking at me like, seriously, Mom?
Yeah.
You even have to ask me this question. So anyway, it ended up not happening, and then we were supposed to be doing a Mexican Riviera, and that was going to be perfect, going out to San Diego, going down to Cabo, then Mazatlan and Puerto Vallarta, and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty wonderful. And then things extended longer than anybody expected. And so now we're scheduled to do 2 back-to-back sewing cruises. We're doing those with Sally Tomato that do bags and another form of sewing. And we're going out of Fort Lauderdale. We're going down to the Caribbean and Mexico. I think we do 8 nights and then come back and then take off for another 6 nights. And so it's a real, it for me, it's really fun. I haven't been on, I haven't worked on a cruise ship for more years than I care to remember. And so it's really going to bring it full circle back for me. And now I'm going to be doing what I love, but on a cruise ship. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
It sounds wonderful. Amanda, this has been a great conversation, and I want to thank you for sharing your stories with us today. If any of our listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can find us through our website. So it's sosoenglishfabrics.com. You can contact our customer service and let them know that you have a question for me or just a general question that they would be able to help you with. But our community on Facebook is fantastic. There's about 70,000 people in there, and so much advice, so much inspiration. We love when people make something and post pictures, and I'll see something somebody made and I'll be, oh my goodness, I hadn't thought of using the fabric like that. And it really makes you stop and think. It's, these are real people. It's not like picking up a magazine and you're like, well, that looks nice on her, but ooh, I could never get away with that. So it's really inspirational to see real people like all of us who just inspire us.
And that's the very community that we like to talk about on this podcast. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun talking to you today.
It was. Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you. Someone for whom sewing is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life. It's a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to megoodman@theflintrock.com and put "You should hear their story" in the subject line. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank BERNINA for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to your joining us next time on So and So.